So this is Dan Hennen along with Greg Fernandez Jr. for another installment of the Crawley case updates. Today is June 4th, 2016, and we've got some updates on the case here with the murder, double homicide, suicide case from January 2015 that took place in Apple Valley, Minnesota. We're going to run for about an hour and hopefully get some invites out and get some audio participation, audio and video from some of our listeners, and then we're going to go over also some of the updates, latest updates that we've just come out here this week and found out. So how are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing good. It's hot, but that's okay.
Good. All right. So what we'll do for the first-time listeners here, for those tuning in for the first time, is to give a brief overview of the case. I myself, Greg, was not a follower of David Cowley or the Gray State before this crime took place. Were you?
No, I wasn't. I actually thought you were, though, so that's interesting. I didn't know that.
No, some of the others were, and a lot of people on the page were big fans and followers for several years of the project, and that's why they joined up. I just got a strange death close to home here that seemed odd, and I picked up on it. And once I got into it, things were not adding up, and turned out to be a guy. I think David Cowley would have been a guy I would have enjoyed hanging around with a lot. We have a lot in common, and so forth. So I was not a fan of his work, but I like what he did, and to me he was a good guy. Now this justice page that was done was not to praise David Cowley or the Gray State Project or say how great of a guy he was, because we don't know that. We didn't know the man. The page is set up for justice because we don't believe that that these three justice has been served here as far as what happened in that house. Bodies were found on January 17th, 2015, and the bodies in the house were David Cowley, age 29 years old, his wife Kamel, age 28, and their 5-year-old daughter Granny, all with a gunshot bullet wound to the head, which to me is a triple murder. A triple homicide, until we find out anything more. But when you start involving a 5-year-old girl in a murder like that, that's when the fears started perking up. This case started drawing some traction. What was it for you that triggered you into it?
Well, it was you, basically. You're the one that got me. You got me hooked into all this stuff, man. But yeah, I think the fact that there was a child involved does have a big part to do with why I kind of stayed on this case. And I think some of the early pushback that I got also made me want to stay on this case, because I'm kind of stubborn like that. And sometimes if people tell me, well, you shouldn't do this, then I'm gonna ask, well, why not? What's gonna happen if I do? So I was totally just dumbfounded. I just could not understand why police would come to this conclusion so early on. Just let the case play out, let everything play out, and don't tell the media so early on that it's a double murder suicide and that's it. I think they were doing that because they didn't want to scare people, right? They didn't want people to think that possibly there was a killer out there still. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for the new listeners out there, within 48 hours of the bodies are being found, this family was laying in that house unnoticed for almost 4 weeks. After the Christmas holiday season into January, nobody stopped over to do a welfare check. None of the friends stopped over. The 5-year-old girl was in school, missed 10 straight days of classes, and the school didn't do a welfare check. May have called, but no one answered. But here in Minnesota, it's more common. I think it's not out of the ordinary for the teacher to stop by the house and knock on the door. It's common here to do that kind of a thing, and that appears never to have taken place. Then we get law enforcement to come in and come into the house and see a man who had a collection of guns, weapons, and ammunition, along with anti-police warfare kind of state militia type of things, and think, well, this guy just lost it, killed him, and let's wrap it up. So 48 hours into the case, law enforcement in the city of Apple Valley, which is a pretty big, it's here in Minnesota, it's over 40,000 population. It's a pretty good staff of detectives and officers. They ruled it a double murder followed by a suicide at the hands of David without any real investigation.
Yeah, but what did they see when they walk into that house, when they go into the house? What are they seeing that makes them think that this is a double murder suicide? That to me it was never clear, and it's still not clear. Who walks into a house and sees Allah Akbar written on a wall and goes, "Oh yeah, David Crowley, someone who is not a Muslim, who has never written Allah Akbar ever, that we know of, all of a sudden now he's writing it, and that somehow proves that he's guilty."
Well,
I mean,
for the first time listeners out there, it came to light 2 months later. This was March of 2014. The first time it came to light that officers announced to the families that blood was written on the wall in Komel's blood that said Allah Akbar. A Quran was laying on the living room floor, opened up to a alleged forgiveness prayer, and a note of paper with a pen next to it says, "Submit to Allah now," or allegedly that David wrote. Now, knowing David as we did, which wasn't in person at all, but David was a very open man who didn't talk about his religion. He was a Christian man. He married a Muslim woman and never brought that up. His family members said that he was open to their religion and open to her. She was open to his, and their relationship, once they first met, for dating and getting engaged and having a child after getting married, religion was never an issue. So once police brought up this Muslim angle, a lot of the crowd on our, we've got 1,100 followers on our page. In the 16 months we've been doing this, everyone at that point threw up their hands by saying, "No, none of this makes sense."
right.
Now they're playing a Muslim Islamic hit as an angle, and the people that were on the fence who thought maybe he did it or maybe the government did it now threw up their hands and said, "We got something else here now, because this is obviously staged to look like some kind of, it's directing the focus elsewhere." And I took it as the same thing. I almost laughed when I saw the news when it hit that day on the article from Fox 9 News. I said, well, now we're on to something, because David Crowley would not write Allah Akbar in his wife's blood on the wall and leave a Quran open. He never brought up that issue once. Never once.
And
that's pretty damning. That's pretty. Now you're getting pretty low for whoever did stage this event. You're going pretty low there as far as that's very distasteful, bringing this whole thing into the mix. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and also it wasn't that this was just written on the wall. This was also written in a separate room, where David wrote, "Submit to Allah now," which makes no sense at all. When so that, and they use that as a suicide note. Actually, Sidra, Kamel's sister, told me that is a suicide note, and I told her it's not a suicide note. That is not a suicide note. You can speculate, and you can say that you think that it is a suicide note, and that's what she's basically saying. But to me, that is not a suicide note. And why would there be one note in an office bedroom, and then another note on a kitchen laptop, and then a big Allah Akbar in the living room wall? So
yeah, it reeks foul play, because none of this is what he would do. He's a man who writes in cursive, as we saw on his notes, and we see this note with a pen that says "Bow to Allah," submit to Allah now in block letters. There's a word pad is up on his machine with a little minimize on the computer that says, "I've loved you all with all of my heart." To me, neither of those are suicide notes. They never were. Those are not a suicide note at all. But I think investigators believe that they were a suicide note. So I'm questioning that to begin with, because a suicide note has to have something signed and some declaration of what it is you're doing and some reason for what it is you're doing, not a note to say, "Open my video to a certain section and submit to Allah now, and I've loved you all." He could have had that written months ago. "I've loved you all with all my heart." It could have been a song he was writing, for all we know. How is that a suicide note?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Is it's not. It's not a suicide note. And the cops never call it a suicide note. They're very careful to make sure that they are not calling this a suicide note. But they also don't use that note or any of those writings to help prove their own case. And that would have helped prove their own case. That would have helped say, okay, well, maybe David Cowley did snap. All that, I think some of the family and friends are saying, well, that was David's jab. That was his way of getting back at his wife's family. But he seemed to be very close to that family. He seemed to be very close to all of his family. And so a lot of it doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of the way that the family acted after these crimes happened, to me, also doesn't make sense. And that's just because I'm not a part of their family. I don't know anything about them. But all that I know is what I would do and what I would want my family to do in a situation like that. And I've expressed it many times to my family.
I have expressed it also to mine. If I was ever found murdered and my family went to police and says, okay, we buy everything you said, it sounds like he did this, it's a done deal, I would be ashamed of the fact that they would just go in and buy into that whole story without looking into it. So that's what got me going on this case as well. The other thing that kept me involved in the case is we know a story like this isn't going to be followed by mainstream media, as it was for a couple days and dropped off the radar. A story like this would be followed by the alternative news. Alex Jones and all these cats, second-tier alternative news would have jumped all over this, and David Cowley and the Gray State were involved closely with Alex Jones and a lot of these players in the media.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did was they took off. They fled, took off, didn't touch the subject at all. Ben Swan covered it once, did a follow-up interview, and that was it. So I kind of took it upon myself to lead the charge in covering this because I felt no one else was giving it the time it was deserved.
Right. And yeah, and I definitely thank you for that because I think you're one of the biggest reasons why this case is still going and why there's so many people that we see asking more questions. And I think as time goes on, there's going to be a lot more people asking these same questions too. There's new people that are asking these questions, it seems, all the time. So I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, it was just a strange scenario listening to the evidence, the so-called evidence unfold. The first thing I thought of when police didn't say right away that rear patio slider door was open. It was someone who requested the police audio of the investigators entering that house that says rear slider ajar, unlocked and slightly ajar in the back. And one of the folks on our page posted right away, and they posted a link to the police audio on the police audio file that says, if you listen closely, that the rear slider was open. So the fact that investigators either downplayed that or hid it on purpose or didn't say anything about it, they knew we were going to come out and someone was going to jump on that with the investigators we've got on these pages here to come up with that. And sure enough, the day later, we found it. So, and each of the two press releases and information pieces that went out by the Apple Valley Police never mentioned once the rear slider. And that's, to me, it's your telltale sign number one. You've got no suicide note. There's no motive. You've got a rear slider that's ajar. You've got David making plans for the future with the various calendars and checklists that he had with big plans for his movie and documentary coming out, upbeat about the future. And then they do the fingerprint test and they say there's no conclusive test on the gun that David fired it. Well, to me right there, I'm not in law enforcement. I don't have a background in detective work, but I would say right now I would call these three murders the cause of death, the gunshot. But how it happened, I would say it's undetermined. Until we find out more, I would call it undetermined because we have no proof that David Cowley did this. And I would respect, I guess, the department, Apple Valley Department, if they just came forward and says, you know what, we don't know. We know 3 people are dead. We know it's a sad case. It's horrendous, but we will put our top investigators out there and try to find what really did happen. And they basically said it's an open and shut case. And then when we pushed back and asked Well, is the BCA analysis done from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension? The forensics? Is the testing done? Are the autopsies confirmed? Are the autopsies completed? Nope, nope, they're still in process. So that's when you and I pushed back to say, well, how come you have an airtight case when you don't have the very basics done in an investigation? It almost looked like some sort of cover-up. Now, we're not saying that it's a cover-up today, but it led many people to believe that by the shoddy investigation. What's your take?
Yeah, and talk about the pushback. It wasn't just pushback from the family or from whoever. There was pushback, as we both know. Sean Wright was one of the first people to reach out to me and ask me not to continue to ask questions on this case, which is a ridiculous thing to ask someone. Now, and then he called me too and was basically saying the same thing. Why does he care? What does he care what I do, how I look at this case, how I look at any case? What is the whole thing? I mean, and I would have backed off. I would have backed off of this case if he would have just given me one piece of evidence, just one. But he said, I have the evidence, we've seen the evidence, but we can't share it with you. That is ridiculous. Okay, I mean, it is crazy to ask someone to back off of a case or to quit asking questions because you're raising more questions, and people might take those questions seriously. So some of his actions, his early actions, were very they really got me asking more questions. And I know Sean Wright had contacted you. Did he want you to back off of this thing too?
Well, they first I think it was the 21st of January, after we had the page up and running for some time, a couple days actually. Thomas Lapp, the other creator of the other Justice page, there's two of them for the new listeners out there. There's a Justice for David Cowley of Gray State, and there's a Justice for David Cowley and Family. So there's two of them out there. Thomas Lapp contacted me and says, hey, I see that you set one up as well. And I said, that was news to me. We had set it up the same day, unknowing of each other. And it was 2 days later, he says, a couple of guys are asking for administrative rights to my page. What's the deal with this? I said, I don't know. I'm not aware of that. Nothing's come my way yet. But that very same afternoon, he granted admin rights to Sean Wright and I believe Danny August Mason, the lead cast character of the movie. And within 2 hours, whole sections of comments and posts from that page were deleted. So this Thomas Lapp then called me back again and says, "What's the deal? Why are they deleting stuff?" I said, "I don't know these guys. I don't know what the deal is. They've seemed nice to me. I've got no beef with them." He goes, "Well, just a heads up, if it comes your way next." And sure enough, the next afternoon, email requests came in to say, "We'd like to have admin rights to your page." I said, "No, that's okay. There's some problems with the admin rights yesterday." And he said, "Well, you better give us admin rights because what you're doing is atrocious." So why do you care? Why do you want admin rights? I thought you're busy grieving the loss of your close friend. We want admin rights, and you're going to hand them over. I said, "No, it's not going to happen." Well, then it comes back with threats: watch over your shoulder, put your head on a swivel. You're going to get yours, he said, and I don't want you coming to that memorial service. I said, what's any of this got to do with your Facebook page? Why do you care what we're posting? It's just information as it rolls in. He called me an idiot and a moron and says, you've disrespected the family. And then that's it. And then he went on and really became angry. And then I had a bunch of friends of his who came on the next following days to say, you better give other people admin rights because we don't want any conspiracy stories out about this case. I said, well, we're just kind of a think tank. We're just discussing the case with options here. We're not steering anyone down some path, and I'm certainly not going to start censoring things. So these guys got really upset right away. And then it was the day later that the Facebook posts on David Cowley's personal Facebook page were deleted. Now, David Cowley was dead at this point. Who has access to his personal page? Who's on it? Why are posts being deleted from his personal page? So I think it was at that point that I kind of got locked in to the whole case because it didn't smell right from the get-go.
Right.
Now, the thing with the law enforcement and investigators is we asked from right away, I think it was you and I, we said, well, let's hang tight before we draw any conclusions as to what type of the analysis. Once the analysis tests come back, then we can kind of lock this up and shut this away. I got better things to do than run this justice page. But they said, well, there was no gunshot residue tests done, no ballistics, no test on the weapon to see if a silencer or a suppressor was in fact used. They never even conducted the test. They said they went out of their way to say that we believe that there was no forced entry in the home, which we don't care about, right? We know the slider was open. And they said that out of their way to say that the blood test on the wall written Allah Akbar was the blood of Cowley. I don't think we cared who the blood. We want to know who wrote the blood. Oh, we never tested the fingerprints on of who wrote it. We never did the forensics, never did the bullet. We said that the bullets retrieved came from that weapon, which I think no one really had an issue with either, but they couldn't find the fingerprints. So right now I would call it a unsolved case. Would you not, with that information base on?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, how do they know that David wrote that?
Yeah, you'd need to have, I imagine a child doing finger paints on the kitchen table after school, and every letter you finish is going to have your latent fingerprint on every single letter. Not where you start, not as you move it along, but where you finish and lift up. They said, no, we never did any of the testing on that. So that's where a lot of these folks came into play by saying there's got to be a cover-up. Or is the police detective force that inept? And we said, well, we don't know what the answer is, but it's got to be one of those two. In a normal detective case, you take that latent fingerprint and you'd get that tested to ensure it's done by David, tie it back, do the fingerprints on the gun, do the gunshot residue test from his left hand that he fired the weapon, and conclusively prove that there was no, on the lands and grooves on that bullet shell casing, on the fragment, that there's no silencer attached to that weapon. None of those tests were done. So then we got a lot of people on board saying that we're anti-law enforcement, anti-cops, that we're just trying to bash them. Well, I've got family, I've got friends in law enforcement. I'm not out to bash law enforcement. Do I believe they didn't do a thorough investigation? Yes. But I think if they were thoroughly investigated, all these things would have been done. So I don't know. To me, it just reeks of taking the short way out and quickly coming to a conclusion. What I've said it before on prior episodes, and I think this is our 8th or 9th broadcast on YouTube that's been open to the public, is that I call it a rush to judgment by the officers. Their only thing that they failed here is that it was a rush to judgment. There's things I don't like that they did about the case. I'm not going to blame them for that, but in 48 hours with the evidence that we have, certainly couldn't have come to the case that it was David Cowley snapped and did this when there's no history of anything of him doing that.
Right.
Yeah, that was. Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
At the end of the year, I don't know if you know, but because they traced the bodies back to being killed roughly December 26th, it fell into the calendar year of 2014. And as you know, I'm an advocate for domestic violence and eliminating that, and I do not like domestic violence at all, especially towards children and kids. Well, since the bodies were found, they went back and re-updated those statistics in the state of Minnesota to say, oh, we've got 2 more victims of domestic violence, and the pictures are Comel and Ranny, because David was this vicious, violent man. So he is now rolled up into the stats as a violent abuser, and Comel and Ranny are in the stats in the state of Minnesota for 2014 as victims of domestic abuse, which really rubs me the wrong way. How about yourself?
Well, yeah, and that also brings into question all of their cases. You know, I mean, come on, do a little research. But I guess it's because they're just going to just buy whatever the cops are telling them to. So if the cops say that that's what happened here, then they're going to say okay, and add it to their stats. So it's not only a bad investigative job, but it's really sad how many people are just trusting what the police say in this case, which I can understand for some people. But for some people that do not have any trust or any faith in their own government and question what the president is doing and question what all these other politicians are doing and Fox News is doing and everybody, but they won't question this. They won't touch this case. They're set. They're 100% sure that David Cowley is guilty. And it doesn't sound like they've seen anything that we haven't seen except for possibly some gruesome photos of those bodies, but it doesn't sound like they've seen or found anything else aside from that. So if we're all looking at basically the same facts that the police have, what does it tell us? So I think starting from the very beginning of when these bodies were found, how long it took 3 weeks for anybody to even notice that there were dead bodies in this house. That by itself, I think, raises many questions about how David was around his family in those later days and how he was around his friends in those later days, because there was a distance. It does seem like he was about to release the documentary film, The Gray State, The Rise, and he was about 2 weeks away from that. And then he decides to throw everything out and kill his wife and kill his daughter and kill himself. Why?
Yeah. Good
the whole money thing, well, they were running out of cash. They didn't have money. That's BS. I'm not buying that, because they did have money in the bank, according to the police reports. And there was a $14,000 check that David's dad left on the porch. Well, David's dad didn't leave it there. David's dad gave him a check for $14,000. Dan Cowley Sr. was the one who actually left the check and the presents and some other mail on the Cowley porch on December 28th. So, but you would kind of notice if a $14,000 check hadn't been cashed in 3 weeks. At least I would hope so. But personally, I would never leave a $14,000 check on anybody's doorstep, no matter who they are.
And it appears that Christmas time in 2014, David and Camille and Randy decided to do Christmas by themselves, and that was fine. They just moved into their house in Apple Valley the Christmas before, so they were just there for a year. They decided to do it alone, and then the rest of the Cowley family, who lives about an hour away in a town called Owatonna, they had celebrated, and on the way home, it appears that Dan Cowley Jr., the older brother, said, "Hey, on the way through, I'll drop off those presents at David's house and leave them there on the way. And along the way, I'll drop off that check, from Dad." Dan Cowley Sr. left a $14,000 check. So you're right in the respect that media portrayed these financial issues in the family. With David coming out with a 2.5-hour documentary that he spent 2 years doing, and changing it to say, you know what, I'm going to release it to free to YouTube for free to the public as an educational tool to learn things about our nation's history, and as a plug for the upcoming movie. He was going to give that away for free when he could have made good money on that. So I, along with you, don't buy that. And I think that's disinformation, the whole financial hardship case. Him, David, and his wife Camille were both active, worked at home, worked from the home, and were both successful in what they did. So that I don't buy. The fact that Dan Cowley Sr. writes a check and 3 weeks later it still hasn't cashed, it hasn't, that to me is fishy, but that falls under the bucket of someone's behavior. I'm not here to judge how someone behaves. I would have not done it that way, but that's how he chose to, whatever. Dan Cowley Jr. says he dropped the gifts off on the 26th of December or the 27th. Can't remember the date. And later it comes out it's the 28th. Now, right. If my brother or someone close to me died and I was the last person to drop off gifts, I would go first thing back to that calendar and say, when was I there and how close was I to the actual event? You're going to know the date It's going to be slam dunk when and what time you were there.
Right.
And so we get Dan the first days after the event, doesn't know when he was there. Comes out later, that months later, that it was wrong altogether, because the only time it changed is when police put the date of the death. They thought it was the 25th at first. Later, they did the investigation, moved it to the 26th. Well, in my mind, my opinion is Dan Cowley changed the date, because if he still says he's there on the 26th of December, now you place yourself at the scene of the crime on the day of a triple homicide. So he said at that point going forward, he said he was there on the 28th. So that's about the time I started putting things together as far as keeping an eye on the activities of the brother is about that time, because things didn't start making sense with him at all. After the deaths, the bodies were found. Many people were coming to our page asking, hey, we haven't seen anything with the obituary. When's the obituary going to be published? And I responded back, I don't know, but a crime this big is going to be local newspaper here is the Pioneer Press and the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And a death of his caliber, that type of future star, future director of the future, they were calling him, the next Steven Spielberg he wanted to be, was never in the Star-Tribune. In fact, an obituary was never published on all three of them. It was a week later that there was an online obituary done on a single person format that whoever filled it out lumped all three names together, whipped up a 1-paragraph summary and hit submit and just punched it out there. And so that looked goofy. That looked very strange. I was personally offended. I think on an obituary, I'm touchy that way, that little Ranny deserved to have her own obituary. Comel deserved to have her own professional, well-written obituary, and David did.
Sure.
Whoever put together these three and wrote a quick half-assed paragraph and hit submit really got people offended, and those who were close to the case think that it was Dan Cowley Jr. who put together that obituary. But at the same time, before the obituaries came out, there was a fundraising effort to make money for Comel's ailing mother, Nyla. So she had part of the problems with the family, going back for some of the new listeners and the first timers out there. July, before the bodies were found, Comel, her mother, was found out she had cervical cancer and was at a pretty advanced stage of it already and was not doing well in their house down in Texas. They had agreed to use chemo to treat it. Comel, she's a dietitian. She's kind of a holistic doctor, wants to treat things naturally. Said, I don't think you should go with the chemotherapy. I'm against that. And David chimed in too. Said, we'd rather have you try some other alternatives for your cancer treatment. She said, no, I'm locked into doing that. It caused a little spat, and they stopped texting, stopped making phone calls, and stopped communicating. Was it because of their use of chemo? I don't know, but there was a marked absence of communication at that point. So Dan Cowley Jr. takes it upon himself, after conveniently the day after he publicly went and retrieved the dog from the pound as a good guy effort. To me, that led to, why is this guy going out of his way to put in doing things in good faith? He posted on Facebook a picture of him and the puppy. I retrieved it from the pound. Don't worry, everybody, I'm feeding it, and he's gaining some weight. The very next day, I've created a GoFundMe campaign. We need to raise money for this poor woman in Texas. It's a GoFundMe. She's dying of cancer, and the medical bills are mounting. Astronomical, he said. I don't think Dan Cowley knows who Nyla Alam even is, and if he's even in fact met her. But the goal raised was $6 million. Now, $6 million really got people confused as to, did he mean 600,000? Did he mean 6,000? Did he mean 60,000? Well, I've set up GoFundMes. You type in the amount you want to raise, you hit next, and it asks you, please confirm this amount. There's no accident that he missed a decimal place. He confirmed it, and in fact didn't title it Nyla Alam Medical Fund. He titled it the Cowley Alam Medical Family Fund. I don't even know what that means. I don't think anyone in the Cowley family had medical needs at all. Anyone in the Cowley family needed money. It was really a fundraiser for Nyla. But he threw $6 million out there, and it really caught people's attention. So it was at that time that things really didn't start adding up. And then I hear a comment from a cousin who went to the memorial service. He said, you know, Dan Jr. was really acting strange. I said, well, what do you mean by that? What's some examples of that? He said, gathered the cousins together at the memorial and says, none of you talk to anyone. No cops, no friends, no media. Don't talk about this case at all. Something big is going down.
Which is
well, I don't know. I don't know what he meant by that or why he even did it. Now, once again, that's how he chose to behave. I'm not criticizing his behavior. I wouldn't have certainly done that. I don't know why he would have said those things. Why would he even care how people react?
That's also what a family member told you, right?
A cousin told me that. Yep.
Right. So that's the other thing.
I can only believe that took place as far as if that story is true.
Right.
It ties in with your conversation with Sean Wright and Sean Wright's conversation to me to say when they were told on basically up front, leave this story alone, drop it, leave it alone, don't talk about the case. Now, once again, I have a hard time understanding someone's behavior to that extent. I'm not sure what Sean Wright would have cared if there's goofy conspiracy theories out there on the internet. What motivated him to get that upset? Now, I know he was going through tough times. He had his tax issues. He was going to make a lot of money on that documentary. Documentary was pulled, given away for free. And then it was only 3 months later that he's brought up on double felony charges in March 17th is when he was convicted. So I know he was looking for cash, making some money, and it didn't sit well with him that David Cowley was going to give away this documentary for free. But it relates back to the behavior of these so-called friends, the behavior of the inner circle of the gray state, how they acted, and their emotions in the aftermath of this event. It struck me as very strange.
Well, right, and Sean Wright was also after David died. Sean Wright, I believe he posted it at least once, saying that they were gonna try to sell the documentary, right? They were not, even though David had said in December of 2014 that he was going to give it away for free after he dies. I believe Sean Wright and maybe others too had plans on selling it instead of doing what David wanted, which was to let the people have it. Now there is a version out there right now. It's a rough cut of that film, but it's not the final version. It's not right. It's not the
correct. Yeah, and just to clarify for those new to the case, in fact, just this week alone, we've added more members and more people are stumbling on this case because number one, no one else in the media is touching it. We seem to be limping along here with just a couple of us on our twice a month video shows. But for those brand new, David Cowley's project with the Gray State involved two main things: a movie, a blockbuster mainstream video movie that he was going to produce, and it's going to come out of Hollywood, and a documentary that was 2.5 hours long, interviewing various folks. So there was two things. The movie was never ever made, never ever produced, and they never even began filming on that. They were still looking for money and funding at the time. But he had spent several years on this documentary, and sometime in September or October timeframe, made the decision to give it away for free. And he made his wishes very clear, I think, on his Facebook posts. David was very good on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, very active, Instagram. And he said, I'm going to give it away for free. It would be great. So with Sean Wright and some of the Gray State guys saying, we want to do his wishes. We want to, don't say things about David Wright because we want to, provide his legacy. Well, David made it very clear he wanted to give it out for free. Now, family bodies are found. Someone gets a hold of a rough cut of that YouTube documentary and releases it. And guess who's there to start pulling it down off YouTube because of, quote, copyright infringements? It's Sean Wright. He pulled it down as quick as people pulled it up. He pulled it down. and he did not want it out there. And like you said previously, in later talks with the current Great State staff or the people taking over Great State, they have made it well aware that they are going to sell the movie. They are going to sell for dollars, cha-ching, cha-ching, that documentary. Now, David clearly said he didn't want to have that. So, what's your take on why would they be pulling that down, and why are they going to sell it now for big bucks? And who's going to reap the rewards? Who's going to reap the benefits of this documentary?
Well, whoever can make money off of it, I guess. I think that's the point of, for some of these people who were involved with this Gray State project as a whole, was to make money. And I think some people were involved because they understood that what David was talking about could really happen if it hasn't happened. You can see Gray State, you can see similar actions in other countries. And we do have some cases in this country where police do kick down doors. I've had my door kicked down, and police were looking for someone, and I looked like that person, and I was handcuffed and held at gunpoint, but they had the wrong person. So they do that. You know, it does happen, but I don't know. I've just been trying to wrap my head around the actions of the Gray State team and this new Gray State Universe website that has come out and popped up and disappeared and is now back. I think that's also another big question, is how do you move forward with the Gray State project knowing that the person who created it is accused of murdering his family and then killing himself? Why would you want to put a project like that out there when you could just as easily make a similar project that doesn't have the Gray State name? So I think at this point, we're going to see a lot of movies that are similar to what the Gray State was supposed to be. But now it's getting even worse, because now we're seeing the continuation of the Gray State project, which is something that personally I don't want to see. I'm not going to protest it. I'm not going to be like, no one should go see this movie because David, killed his family, blah, 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 or whatever. I just find the actions, strange of some of the family and friends who think David Cowley is guilty, but at the same time want to move forward with this project.
Yeah, the thing for the newer, that the history, the timeline I've put together has been evolving all these months here. 16 months later, there's a timeline, and it's pretty. If you read into it, what's really going on here from a business perspective, it's very disturbing. In the September timeframe, when David started cutting himself off, is what they said. Is what he was doing, I believe, was pulling himself away from these, distancing himself from his inner circle of friends. Now, October 1st, an email went out per the police report. This is the Apple Valley Police Report that went out, 94 pages long. One of the pages talks about the interview with Danny August Mason. Danny August Mason received a email from David Cowley's attorney on October 1st, basically saying, we want you to relinquish your rights for the Gray State. We're moving forward, David said. We're moving forward without you. The script is going to change, and I'm coming up with a new leadership team. That's pretty harsh words there, and I don't think Danny August Mason would have taken that lightly. And what we see is no follow-up to that. And this is Danny August Mason's own words. There was no follow-up until he received a follow-up email from David Cowley on December 7th. December 7th says, hey, what's the update? What's the status? Are you going to fill out this form or not? Are you going to fill out this relinquish your rights? So he says, no, I'm going to run it by my attorney. Well, you had 6 weeks to do that, and you still haven't done it. So money was a big thing in the case, and in all cases like this, you follow the money, and you can get to the root of what's probably going on behind the scenes. Sean Wright didn't have a job, had to end up finding one later, was going through debt from the state of Minnesota, child support, back taxes from the state. was in debt $36,000, I think, according to the State Department records. That's not me pulling it out of my head. And he was facing 2 felony charges. So he needed money too. Wasn't probably too happy with David Cowley giving away the documentary for free, because that was supposed to be his gravy train, I believe, his moneymaker, his bread and butter, that documentary. He was very active in that documentary, and in fact, later on, told people on Facebook that he was 90% involved as the owner, the creative owner of the documentary. So that's why he took it upon himself to start pulling it off the web, because that was his baby. He did not want it out there. Even though it was a rough cut, I watched it. It was very well done. I thought it was just fine. It could have gone out there, and it's very educational film. But he sat day in and day out and pulled it off YouTube whenever someone posted it up there, claiming copyright. I don't know what kind of copyright things Sean Wright has to do with anything. But you get to a point where there's December 9th, a post from David Cowley on Facebook saying, I'm 2 weeks away from finishing the documentary. I'm going to give it away for free. The deadline's set for 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks, I think, from the 9th, it came out to 28. December 28th was about the time frame that the deadline was set. And he also had, I think, December 31st was a deadline. So he made, and even the photographic evidence from the police crime scene showed, I think it was Christmas Day, a note written on a Post-it note saying 6 more days to go till the new year. That's the deadline. I got to get this thing out. So he's referring to the documentary to release it on the 31st. So David knew 28th to the 31st, last 3 days of the year, he's going to release this thing for free, and it's going to be big. And once he made that public, I believe that his life was on a time clock. The clock was winding down because the Gray State guys, if indeed they had something to do with this, they needed to get him out of the way. He was going to lose everything for these guys on the team and on the staff. And so the clock was ticking, and whatever came to play, suspiciously enough, the bodies are found the 26th, 2 days before the due date of giving this thing out for free. So that's what piques my interest from a business perspective. And now they're going on January 1st of just this last year. New company, Gray State Universe, is formed. Guess who the proprietor is of Gray State Universe, Greg? It's Danny August Mason.
Danny August Mason. Why does that name keep coming back up?
So going from an actor to now, all of a sudden, I guess he's in the business of starting businesses here in the state of Minnesota. And it was a couple weeks after that he filed for a trademark of the name Gray State. He owns a trademark for Gray State right now. It got approved. There's a serial number on it. If you look it up in the legal case, he has the Gray State. So he's obviously taking the ball and moving it forward with the plans as of January 1st. The announcement was January 1st, big year for the Gray State Universe, with a upcoming movie and documentary in the works. So to me, people get upset because it's plagiarizing. Is he taking David's work? Is he going to give David credit? Is he taking the script? Who has the script? Did he take it and he's going to sell it now to Hollywood? Is he going to publish that documentary and sell it and make a bundle? Those are the questions that have people upset. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, and you can understand why they would be a little worried about the future of the Gray State project. And it's just like, do we really need to do this? Do we really need to keep this project going? Is there any value towards it now? Or is it something that's just really tainted? And it seems very tainted, regardless of your view on the Gray State project. This whole situation has been tainted by the fact that there's 3 people dead here, and there's one who is accused of killing the other 2. So I would not want to see the Gray State project go forward. And I'm curious if there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way, or who think that I'm crazy, or I'm not one that matters, because I never liked the project. So
I got a question for you, Greg. I agree with your comment. A project that's got a massive deranged killer behind it, would you want your name even associated with the project going forward? Wouldn't you want to run for the hills and say, I have nothing to do with that guy?
Yeah, I definitely would not want my name attached to that.
What do they do when you follow All Star Wrestling? Chris Benoit, similar thing happened to him. What was the fallout, and was it similar to what happened here?
I think so. I think this case is a little. It was more similar to the Kurt Cobain case, but as far as the Chris Benoit case, that was another one that was quickly wrapped up, and it was just like, okay, he's guilty. But the difference is a lot of Chris Benoit's friends were saying, wait, they weren't saying that Chris Benoit didn't do it. They were just saying, this is not the person we knew. This is not something that he would do. It didn't make sense. Now they found a lot of drugs, not drugs, but a lot of problems with Chris Benoit. His brain was basically mush. But at least they did that research. They took the time to understand why they believe Chris Benoit would do this. With this case, they didn't spend any time to kind of, figure out why would David Cowley do this? Why would he kill them? There was no, just like you said, there were no tests done. The ballistic tests, they weren't done. Well, what was done? Yeah. What did they do to help prove their case? And so I think a big part of this is to get the case reopened, because it will shed light on that, and maybe we'll find an officer who will actually take the time to do a proper investigation on this case. And it's not too late. It's never too late. And especially right now, even though it has been 16 months, the case is still new. It's still fresh. There's still time right now for family members, for friends, for anybody to come forward and help us with this. Help us get the case reopened, because we cannot do it. It's not going to happen by you or by me. Family and friends are going to be the biggest, the ones who can get this case reopened, or a good cop who is out there, or something needs to happen. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I do believe one day this case will be reopened. I do believe.
I agree. I think it'll have to be, and it will. It's going to take probably years to get to that point, but I can hang with it. Hey, Greg, yeah. just to know, can you post that link of our broadcast here? I see that we've got no one joining us. Yeah, we put an invite out. If you can post it on both of those justice pages, and hopefully we can get some participants here. We're coming up on an hour here, but we can go a little longer if anyone else joins us. And while you're sending that out, I'll update the listeners here to some of the further latest development in the case.
Please do.
The case was ongoing. Whenever we discussed the case with law enforcement, for instance, we were hit back with the response of, the case is ongoing, we can't provide anything. We can't provide answers because the case is ongoing. But yet in 48 hours, they already had the answer. The case was wrapped up, and it was a done deal in 48 hours. But none of the analysis was done till October, November, December timeframe. And while they get it packaged, ready to go, meet with the lawyers in the city of Apple Valley to approve it and distribute it to the press, it's now 51 weeks later. So 51 weeks later, the case is closed now, and Apple Valley Police is on record not going to talk about it any further, because it doesn't add any value to anything, which is fine. Now, early on, Greg, you had taken the initiative to bounce some questions off of Officer Gummert, and he says, I will be glad to answer them once the case is closed. So this time comes around, and Officer Gummert says, I'll respond. I know it's after we're done talking about it, but I did promise you, send me the questions, make them easy, yes, no, to some extent, whatever you need to do, and I'll get back to you. So Greg put together with a group of us, collaborated and submitted to Officer Gummert 21 questions. And so we sent the questions, and 5 weeks later he responded. This was just recently now. This was just in the last couple of weeks that he gave back the questions. And Greg, you worded it easy enough for any officer to say yes, no, slam dunk. One of the questions that came up was, did you have any contact with Komel Alam's father, Anjum? And the reason we asked that question was, in talking, you and I both talked with Sidra, the sister, via instant message and email, and got some good information out of her. But what she had said all along was, the police went through me. My mother's ill in the hospital. She's not doing well with cancer. In fact, she's still alive today, but
Thank God.
not doing well. She said, run everything through me because my dad's busy on June, is dealing with the mother, and this is too hard on him. So run everything through me. The police report that we said, don't know what page particularly it was, but it said when they were interviewing Sidra that she had recommended that the police work directly with her. Going forward, she could be the point person. So question number 16 to Officer Gummert was, did you contact Anjum Alam directly at all? Email, phone call, in-person visit. Did you even talk to him? The answer came back from Officer Gummert, no. And the question that I have a hard time with is, as a parent of a victim of this type of a crime, I would think that the parents want to be directly involved, not going through a 22-year-old college student for your information on the investigation. So I filed a Freedom of Information Request Act a couple of weeks ago. The gal at the office called and says, Dan, your disc is ready to be picked up. And I went to pick up my disc of information, and there was a note on it, little Post-it note for the gal working, and says, Officer Gummert, make sure you contact Dan and meet with him in person.
Oh.
So he said he wanted to meet me. Now remember, he's done talking about the case. I've never met the man. We agreed to disagree on some things, but no problem. I wait around. He comes down. We chat. One of my questions was, I said, it's confusing to me that dealing with the loss of a loved one for a family, that you would deal directly with the sister of a victim instead of the father. The father's name is Anjum Alam. He's down in Texas. He's easily reachable. He's only 62 years old, I think. Wouldn't you want to get his information on the case like that? And Officer Gummert says, I was in constant communication with Anjum, the father. He said, I was in constant communication. I said, well, we just got, didn't the answers back say that he never communicated? No, I didn't say that. I talked to him primarily. I said, okay, once again, we're not pointing fingers of who's lying and who's not, and who's being deceptive and who's not. It's miscommunication. But this particular miscommunication, I would sense, is rather large.
Yeah.
You're being told point blank, have you ever conversed with this man? The answer is no. I don't think there's any room there to take the question wrong, write down the wrong answer. Oh, I guess I missed it. I don't know. But Sidra said they were talking to her the whole time. Now, there's people out there that you and I have to deal with, Greg, that are true conspiracy folks that are thinking that there's a cover-up, there's a government cover-up, this goes to the top level, the Apple Valley police are in on it. I don't buy that. I'm not too receptive on that. But a question like this only feeds and only fuels the fire. Why would Officer Gummert say that I talk to him all the time when he just got done answering your questions the week before by saying, strictly, the answer was no. The answer was no, I never communicated with him. Do you think he did the answers, or did someone else in the office write those answers? And why? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, it is. It is. And giving Detective Gummert the benefit of the doubt, yes, I would say that it was him that answered those questions. Now, only he knows if that's true. And if anybody else was involved, they would know that too. But what I do know is what he told you and what he told me were two completely different things. Two completely different things. And then when I asked him to clarify this, then he goes back and says, okay, yes, I did talk with him. And he messed up, basically. He's not trying to hide anything. He wants to be very clear. He's not hiding anything from anybody. It was just whatever, so I have a big problem with that, because then he calls into question everything else, every other question that I asked him, and how truthful were those other questions, or did he mess up on some of the other 21 questions too? Now,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to finish it up by saying, so now what? I have to go back and ask him about the other 20 questions? Do I resubmit the 21 questions and say, just in case you messed up on these two, let's talk a little more about this. But the one thing I did not like is that he said, yes, we're not going to talk about the case because it's active. Once it's closed, we'll talk with you. Once the case closed, then they said they're not talking about the case. How do you do that? Why? You can't, I mean, you can't. And then at the same time, Detective Gummert is talking about transparency. We want to be as transparent as possible, when he's done the exact opposite. Everything he's done is to not be transparent. It is basically to make us try to figure out how to phrase these questions to get some type of answers, to get some type of guidance on just saying, look, man, we just want to know what happened here. That's it. We're not accusing you. We're not accusing the government. We're not accusing the Crowleys. We're not accusing the Gray State team. We just want to know what happened here. And they say, no, you cannot know. It is not up to you to know. You have no right. You will not know unless you agree with us. Then we'll tell you. Because you disagree, we're not going to tell you. And because you created this group, and because you're a part of this group, because of that, you will never know what the truth is. I've been told that point blank, but I will never know what the truth is. And I believe that those people who told me that, they have no idea what the truth is too. So,
it's very frustrating. I would feel bad if I lived in the city of Apple Valley, knowing my taxpayer money was going to the police force there that can't seem to do basic things. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but Sidra did say that she did receive the cell phone back from Kamel as part of the evidence. And then she was quick to note that she says, I can't find the SIM card. The SIM card inside is missing. So
it was taken out.
So it was taken out. So once again, I don't believe whether it's the police department or the detectives are helping the cause, but it's because of the behavior. Once again, it doesn't add up. It's not professional behavior. I mean, I just can't imagine it being that goofy. So it's been frustrating. There's been a lot of things like that with the case. And once again, we don't want to point fingers and accuse, but we've got these pages opened up. The Justice for David Cowley and Gray State page has over 7,100 likes. It's being tracked from people from, I think it's 54 different countries. I think last I checked, it was 54 different countries are following this, the movement of this case. And David Cowley had a big name, had a big following worldwide. And that was the first thing that I wanted to tip off to. I was hoping that the investigators and detectives in this case knew. And then I talked to a family member too in law enforcement to say, I don't know if they have their head around the complexity of this case and what this all involves. And we never did ask the Apple Valley Police, but were they or do they feel that they were in over their head on this case? This is a big case with people following from all the states in the U.S. How many countries? I just mentioned 50-some countries are following this case around the world. It's huge, but the media will not touch it. The alternative media will not touch it. And that's our question. I think that's what our, if I would have a mission statement, so to say, is to keep this alive and keep the pulse on this case, because too many things don't add up.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's the sad thing here, is there is so much that just does not add up, man. It really doesn't. And I think the more that we talk about this, the more that we create a dialogue where we can all just talk about this, it doesn't matter what our view is on this, but we should be open to that. And I do hope that, some other people one of these days will join us if they have something to say, if they have something to add to it, because we have been following this case from the very start. That is true. But so have other people too. And there's a lot of people that haven't been following this that can walk in at any point and just say, well, wait a minute, what about this? Well, let's talk about that. Well, okay, there's something strange happening here. And I think one of the big problems with the people who think that David Cowley is guilty is they don't even want us asking questions now. They want to move on. They want to just move on and have nobody ask any more questions. Well, it's not up to them. They don't decide when we get to stop asking questions. We get to decide that. And I'll stop asking questions when I get some damn answers. and I haven't gotten any yet. So here we are, and I'll be waiting. I hope 20, 30 years from now that Detective Gummert and I can sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk about why he was wrong, and talk about why their investigation sucked, why it was just crap, it was garbage. I mean, come on, and that's okay, you know. But this is his job, and I'm not trying to get him in trouble or, you know, get him kicked out of his job or make him look bad or anything like that. But it's like, come on, man. You know, there's just so many simple things here. Even if we just talk about, you know, 2 or 3 of the basic things that Gummert did or didn't do, or did or didn't see. How do you miss a bullet hole above your head? And then you don't know when you saw that bullet hole. Oh yeah, I saw it, but I don't know the exact date. I mean, come on. Of course you know. How could you not know when you did or didn't see that? Obviously, you didn't see it on the
Let's touch
17th.
base on that. Let's touch on for the newer viewers out there, and then we'll see if there's other people wanting to join in here too before we wrap up. But a very important piece of this case was police were there on the 17th of January and retrieved 2 bullets, one from Randy and one from Kamel, I'm assuming, and wrapped up the case and took off. 2 days later, the cleaners were there, and as they were vacuuming up the rug, a bullet, fragment fell out of the bottom of the rug. They contacted police. Now it's the 19th of January, or the 20th, 19th or 20th, and they said, "Yep, this is a fragment of a bullet, 40 caliber. I guess we missed it, but thanks for giving us the heads up." Then the 19th.
You still don't see the bullet. Right? Okay, go ahead. Finish.
So then they've accounted for 3 of the alleged 4 gunshots, bullet fragments. So 911 gets a call on January 19th. Apple Valley Police get a 911 call for suspicious person in the home. This is the Cowley home now. 2 days after it's been cleaned up, after the bodies are found, a neighbor sees a person in the house sneaking around. So as if the story didn't get any more strange to begin with, they find out somehow the person's name was Chris Klein. Chris Klein was in the house on the 19th. What was he doing? I don't know. We know that the house wasn't finished being professionally cleaned. It may have been started, but why was he in the house? They go to his house. He wasn't there. They leave a business card and say, "Call the detectives. This is for Chris Klein. I believe he lives in South Minneapolis. Give us a call. We want to chat." He waits till February 18th to call back authorities, which raises my suspicion right away. I could never get away with that. It sounds like they didn't try to get in touch with him again. He goes, "Hey, I'm ready to talk about the case. It's February 18th. He goes, "I was there because we saw a bullet hole in the ceiling." Officers say, what do you mean a bullet hole in the ceiling?" "Oh, above the front door, right where David's body was a bullet hole. We knew it went up into the attic, and so we opened up the attic door and crawled around looking for this fragment in the attic of the house. You should come by and take a look at it." They said, "Well, this is news to us. Where is it? We'll be out there right away." So officers come out now. This is February 18th. And folks, for listening, I'm not making this stuff up. This is right out of the report. This is their words. The third time they go back, they look right above where they were standing, straight up, bullet hole, 40 caliber. They said, "We didn't see that." They crawl into the attic, fish around, and find what turns out to be evidence piece number 57 in the case. Little evidence table tent number 57. They added a fragment they found in the insulation of the attic. They did the testing on the DNA. David's blood was on that fragment. That was the kill shot of David Cowley. So a month later, we have 3 visits by police to find, by other people finding them, bullet fragments from the case that total up now to the 4 bullet fragments. Most important, I would think, would be the David Cowley one. The others, I think, are lower importance, but you certainly would find a bullet fragment in the carpeting. I don't think they look too hard. But the one in the ceiling was literally, when you see the photographic evidence from the crime scene photos that were given to us, 464 photos show the officers right there where the body was of David Cowley near the entryway, and a picture taken of the doorknob to prove no forced entry once again, a picture of the wall, and a picture of the floor. Never once looked up. Now, what we see later, after the 18th, is new photographs that enter into the disc, the CD-ROM of photographs from the crime scene. All out of sequence, the naming convention, there's like 15 more photos of just the entryway taken on February 18th, of course, like they said in the picture in the police report. 18th, we went back. Sure enough, the camera evidence showed the camera was taking photographs on the 18th of February of the most important fragment around of the bullet hole right above their heads, with a fragment that some friends of David Cowley were messing around the house, and they saw this, and they went muddling around up in the attic trying to find this fragment. So I don't know where to even begin with that, but it's just, I just can't even imagine.
It's also not clear how police identified Chris Klein as that person who was in the house, because when Detective Gummert was asked, he just said unknown. So they don't know. Well, of course they know. Somebody knows. I mean, how does someone report a suspicious person? How does somebody know that that suspicious person is Chris Klein? And so that's always been another question that has never been answered. And we don't know who called 911 on January 18th.
We don't know.
We just know that
we don't know which neighbor called, but all they said was that they called in a report of a suspicious person in the home. Now, with the triple homicide or whatever went down in that house, I'd be sketchy as a neighbor too, looking out your window and finding someone. Obviously, they were either sneaking around or something in the house. So they called in. They found out it was him. How? You pose a great question, Greg. How do they know that person was Chris Klein in the house? Well, later we find out on the Facebook page, Mason Hendricks comes along and says, we know it was Chris Klein because we were there with him. 5 of us were there. We're all in the house.
So okay, wait. So there's 5 people in the house, but the neighbor only calls about 1 person. Wouldn't the neighbor call about 5 people in this house?
Well, we don't know if it was day or nighttime, and if it was nighttime, they maybe just saw 1 person, and the other people could have been up in the attic or down in the basement and may not have been in that side of the house. But the call went in for just a suspicious person, not plural. Mason went on to say that he confirmed it was the 19th. Which, remember now, the house wasn't professionally cleaned until the 20th or the 21st. Completed. It was, I think, started on Sunday, the 18th, wrapped up on the 19th or 20th when the bullet was found, and then wrapped up, I think, on the 21st. So why were 5 guys in the house snooping around up in the attic, enough so to warrant a 911 call? And then they said, oh, it's Chris Klein. Well, who else did police investigate that further? Why was 5 people in the house? What were you doing in the house? And why was Chris Klein in the house? If it was Chris Klein, why did he take 4 weeks to return a phone call to authorities? So, not saying Chris did anything wrong here. I don't even know Chris Klein. But once again, it's the behavior. If I had a business card tucked in my door to say, call this officer about the case, I'd call him the next day or the same day or at worst a couple days later. This guy waits a month and say, "Oh, I'm ready to talk now."
Well, maybe.
Yeah, he finally.
Well, we also don't.
It didn't sound like the officers were making multiple attempts, and it sounds like Chris Klein wasn't making multiple attempts to call back. It says when we contacted him on the 18th of February is when we finally touched base. So it didn't sound like it was too prudent of a high level of importance. But he goes, no, we're looking for a bullet. Well, which means the other 4 people in the house that were called for 911 never mentioned to police that they were indeed looking for a bullet. Only Chris does, which is a month later. So it's just it's a bizarre, very bizarre case, very strange. We'll keep on it. We'll keep providing updates to the listeners as we can move on with information. But it's hard when you don't get any answers, any straightforward answers on the case. What are your thoughts? We're going to wrap up in here in a couple minutes, Greg. Any finishing thoughts?
No, I just think we're gonna keep on it, and I'm looking forward to talking about this more. And I would love to hear other people's views on this case, and I'd love for them to continue to reach out to us and help us understand why maybe we are wrong, why maybe David Crowley is guilty. And I'm totally open to that. I'm open to the possibility that David Crowley is guilty of what they say he is. But you got to show me some evidence, man. You can't. I'm just not going to trust you. I don't care who you are. It's it. I just don't work like that. And I think there's many people out there who kind of feel that same way.
Very good, very good. Let's see if we got anyone else here joining us. We did send out the invite on a couple of the justice pages, so probably in the next 2 weeks we'll do this again and do the updates. I know there's a couple of Freedom of Information requests out there in the hopper that we should have back here early next week, and we'll discuss those types of topics as well as any new things that come up. But thanks for your time again, Greg, and if you have any other closing thoughts here, we'll wrap it up.
Nope, that's it. And until we meet again.
All right, for Greg Fernandez Jr., this is Dan Hennen. Today's June 4th. We'll be wrapping up our broadcast here. We'll be posting this and the links onto YouTube. Until next time, thanks for listening. Hello, my name is Dan Hennen. Today is April 6th, 2017, and I'll be joined with Greg Fernandez Jr. Today we'll be talking about the most recent article in the New Yorker that came out called Death of a Dystopian, the article about the David Crowley family that just came out here this week. And we'll be discussing this. It's out on your newsstand on the April 10th, 2017 edition. And what we'll do tonight is go over some talk, discussion, and some questions we have relating to that, to the article. Welcome to the program, Greg.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so what we've got is this long-awaited article by Alec Wilkinson, and it originally was due out in August or September of 2016 for the listeners out there that aren't aware of that, and now it just hit the bookshelves here on the newsstands here on Monday, April 3rd. So what we'll do, it's been out there 3-4 days now. We've each had a time to read it once, twice, 3 times and kind of digest some of this, but we'd like to get some of the information out regarding this. I'm not going to call it strange or odd article, but it's got a lot of things going on in this article, and hopefully you jotted down some notes, Greg, and we'll go through some of these items. What was your first thought when you saw the online article?
My first thought was, what is he talking about when he says death of a dystopian? So I was like, okay, what does that mean? He's calling him a dystopian. Can you explain what a dystopian is?
I think that in David's in the Gray State Project, each of the summaries of the project, the movie, the documentary, the projects he was working on, they talked about David filming life in a dystopian world, and I think that's all. He's using that phrase because it's come up multiple times in the Gray State, and that may have been just a nice catchword there of calling, David Crowley the dystopian rather than the world we're living in. But
well, there's a other weird phrase where he talks about the alternative right conspiracy theorist. Now, this is a new term that I haven't really heard that much about. Have you heard anything about this alt-right?
I don't, and you know me well enough, I don't follow left, right, Democrat, Republican. I'm not following the paradigm there, but he's throwing around some phrases in this article to try to, almost seems like to try to pigeonhole people into different buckets. And we know that David Crowley was not the norm, was not the normal guy out there as far as these types of phrases, I would say. But he was out there trying to raise awareness. But there is phrases out there that he was using in this article. I'll look it up here. I've got it up on my screen, but I haven't found it here yet.
Well, I'm just asking because this whole project, this whole Gray State project, started in 2010. So I'm just wondering how new of a term that really is.
Yeah, it says right on the lead on the article, says the alt-right conspiracy theorists think that the government killed the aspiring libertarian filmmaker David Cowley, but the truth is far stranger. That's the subtitle here of the article. So once again,
Here we go.
It's
Yeah.
writing it's calling David Cowley a libertarian, which is fair, but anyone who doubts the story is now an alt-right conspiracy theorist. And once again, not just that, not one theory. Like you and I have mentioned many times, there's multiple theories out there. You and I still don't know what is true and what is not, but this is once again labeling all of us into one bucket, thinking that the government did this. And certainly there's
Right.
people out there that do believe that, but the article is really painting, dropping everyone. It's painting with a very broad brush that we're all falling into this bucket.
And then it makes us wonder why they would do that. Well, it's a very easy setup, because then they can give you all these things and everybody rolls their eyes. Oh, it couldn't be the government. Why would the government do this? Blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But it still puts the whole focus on, well, if we can disprove that the government did this, or show enough proof that, no one has any proof or any facts that the government actually did do it, then that will also disprove every other theory. But I don't think that's what's gonna happen here. It's actually going to lead to more theories of, well, okay, if it wasn't the government, then who was it? And if it was David who is guilty of this, then why are we having so much trouble finding out what really happened here? Why is it all like a big game? It's like a big thing to these people, having their own film and making their own version of what they think happened.
Correct.
Which is fine. Nothing wrong with that.
And that's a good point when you said that, what they think happened. After reading this entire article, I still haven't found any evidence or anything to support that new information was found that proved David Cowley did this. It comes with all new scenarios with this diary, once again, and two people becoming unhinged in a psychotic episode under a new type of psychosis. Mr. Wilkinson refers to it as that the two people really lost bearing and lost their touch with the real world, and all this happened. Now, all this diary, once again, the thing I read after reading this thing twice is Mr. Wilkinson does not mention an online diary. He does not mention this being an electronic diary, and he never uses the phrase written diary. So in reading articles like this, if it does appear to be planted or propaganda, articles like this to try to sway public opinion, you typically look for things that are not in the article. What's missing? There's a lot of things here missing in this article, a lot of important things that are missing in this article. And I just found interesting enough that never was the word written, electronic, or online diary. It just kept saying diary and or journal. You and I know both the police report in the 94 pages from the Apple Valley Police Department only mentioned one journal. It's an online journal that David created on September 1st of 2014. Only a few entries were made, and it goes on to talk about David writing paragraphs and small jotting entries in that journal of spending time with his daughter, doing things with his wife, working out, typical just day-to-day activities. Now, the chief of police went on to say, after reading that journal or those entries to that journal, that nothing stuck out, nothing came out to him in his mind that would lead someone to believe why David would do this. So to me, I interpret that as those are just everyday journal entries of what he was doing, day-to-day activities. The journal details that Alec Wilkinson here is writing about and giving quotes from actual, sounds like cell phone video footage, recordings, self-recordings, journal details, very in-depth of a person becoming unhinged and having a psychosis, psychological illness, mental illness, whatever this may be, but it goes very in-depth. So he goes on to say that this journal started in April, ended in November, and showed a steady decline of a person's almost basically documenting his own mental decline, instability. So all we know from this article is that there's two definite diaries or journals. This is not the one the police report was talking about. The police report never mentions another one. So one thing we can put down as fact is that it seems to me it's very obvious that there are two distinct different journals, at least in this case. What are your thoughts?
I think we have to know when both journals started then, because the times do kind of seem, they kind of line up from what I'm seeing. Because if you go from April of 2014 to actually, I don't know. We'll have to see when in the police reports, when do they say that David's journal ended? That's what I'm gonna look for. I know we have it somewhere, but um, and then
They said for sure it started in September, and this one on the New Yorker article says for sure it started in April.
okay, well then yeah, I mean yeah,
And then it went on for 7 months. The other one I think was just an entry, some various non-important journal entries that were just in this journal. I don't know when that ended, but we can look it up and find out. This one says it went on for 7 months, ending, I'm guessing, sometime in November.
and we basically don't know if that was a written or if that was a typed up journal.
We don't
because
know.
The article does not state that, which seems to be something that they really should have. But
As much scrutiny that this article is going to come out with, you would think that the simple detail would be there, whether this is electronic or not. Now, the neighbor, Judy Prochnow, and husband Colin, on the talk with you and also on the Facebook pages, have always used a similar phrase, the online diary, the online journal. So I think that this one, if they did find it, it was an electronic typed journal or diary that David made entries into by typing on his computer in a Microsoft Word document, something to that effect. I don't believe it was online. The one that the police found specifically said the word online, which to me is a web-based journal that you log into by going to a URL address and typing on. So I don't know. I think we got two different journals here. This is the first really time it's been mentioned. Others have mentioned it, but this goes into some very deep, in-depth details where this author is using quotes and various things. Now, the documentary that's coming out, for those listening, at the end of the month is the Tribeca Film Festival in New York City. A documentary called A Gray State by Eric Nelson the world premiere will be at the end of the month. That sounds to me like it's very tied into this article and almost as a companion piece to market, to get out there to generate interest for the movie coming out. So it looked like the director of the movie and those involved with the documentary movie are working in concert here with Alec Wilkinson. It looks like from the New Yorker to kind of tie this together as a companion piece. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, because they all sound the same. You know, he says in one of these quotes here, David was losing his mind and he didn't seem to know it. I mean, of course, Alec doesn't know that, so he's speculating. First of all, the only question is, who's feeding that to him? And I say it just like that, not, what has he actually researched or anything, but, a lot of this stuff seems like this guy, at least when he contacted me, he didn't know anything about this case. So why would you be writing this? I mean, come on. I mean, this is a very, very serious case, and if you don't know what you're talking about here, then you should not be writing anything on this case. That's just my own feeling. So, and to call David, to say that David was losing his mind, that's a very serious thing. Now, of course, I hope, it seems like he's a guy that wouldn't just say that unless he really had some proof or felt like there were some strong reasons why. But that's kind of what we're hearing, is David lost his mind. Yet in some ways this was pre-planned, and in some ways it was a pact, and in some ways they try to blame the wife kind of for this whole thing, that she was changing, and that she was going through some rapture, some very, very odd stuff. One point here that says David had some visions of horror for 20 minutes. I mean, there's just a lot of weird stuff to me that looks like it's very similar to someone, when there's demons trying to get at someone. I mean, real demons. So, I mean, that's just, that's right now. That's just a very, very wild theory. But I mean, how can you not at least look at some of that stuff with the whole blood writing? I hope they at least, I don't know. That to me is just strange.
It did seem strange, and after reading it, it left many to wonder, as I've seen other comments saying it sounded to me like this family needed an exorcist in the home, for an exorcism, because of the demonic angle, the satanic angle that was being played in a lot of this stuff. Now, would Alec Wilkinson be one potentially paid to write an article like this by an outside agency to set a certain narrative instead of just writing an authentic article? When I wrote,
sure hope not.
Spoke with him as well, he didn't seem well versed in the story. He didn't seem like you'd mentioned. He didn't know the story too in depth as far as a lot of the stuff that when I brought up to him, it seemed new to him. So, like you had just stated, that for someone writing an article this vast, this large, this much exposure in the New Yorker,
and given so much, he was given so much.
Yeah. It sounded like the recordings and everything else, the audio, the video. Maybe more will come out with the video of this information, but it certainly sounded like a young couple becoming mentally unhinged as the winter and the fall and the early winter started here. But surprisingly enough, he never brings up drugs. Never brought up the fact that these are potential hallucinations after being on a bad trip. Or on LSD or acid or something that would cause this kind of thing. Which I interpreted before with other conversations that people were saying that he was overusing drugs. He was increasing his absinthe. He was increasing his marijuana. He was doing marijuana with mushrooms with absinthe, and all this stuff caused from it. It doesn't make sense to me that these things would come. Now you're seeing a very different, almost not a demon possession, but something else. Nowhere in here does it sound like these are the results of recreational drug use. Now, if you're going to go down the mental road, which he kind of stopped shy of going down to say they were mentally ill. He just said that they just lost touch with reality. Right. One person going through this would be very strange, very rare, very odd. And what he's alluding to is that him and Kamel, David and Kamel, both around the same time of the year, both fell into this rut for the same number of months and ended up killing them both. To me, the likelihood of a couple both going down this same rabbit hole seems highly irregular, highly odd.
Yeah. Yeah, they also never mention the whole bullet hole in the living room either, which both Alec and his fact checker both found strange.
Yeah.
But that's not mentioned here. But they can mention all this other stuff, that is first of all, it's like, okay, they must have the evidence that David Cowley actually wrote this. So it must be, hopefully it's, paper, something on paper. But I don't see anything from what they've written here that leads me to believe anything more about this pack theory. And I really think that's where this film, the documentary, I think it could be headed there.
Yeah, you're right. It never once does it mention a pact, a theory, an agreement of both David and Kamel agreeing to do this heinous crime. It seemed to me more like she was going down a dark and scary world, and so was he. And then it ended with the article saying that David sat down for killing the daughter and wife, that he killed himself. Well, it really leaps to some wild assumptions based on what they assume happened here, but it's really presented as fact. This article is really presented as fact, and it's got enough of the fluff built in with the strange psychotic episodes, which really is more of an indirect relation to anything. It doesn't prove anything. Now, keep in mind that on social media, David was making sane comments, very lucid conversations in posts. So if he was fading in and out, that may be one thing. But he certainly didn't lose his mind. He was making posts about excited for the future, working on his documentary and things like that, which clearly was not from a deranged man's holding himself up in the house. The article does go on to say that they cut off relationships with friends, family, everybody. They never left the house. They didn't do anything. Now keep in mind, the article does not mention the fact that David and Kamel were still dropping off Rani at school every morning together and picking her up every afternoon together. So they were leaving the house. They were out in public. They were being seen at the school every day. Nothing seemed strange, odd, or out of place by the teachers, various faculty, various other children's parents. Remember, they still came off as normal. So were they going through the switch being turned on and off at various points here in October, November, and December, and then flipping back to being normal? One can only speculate.
Yeah, but it just doesn't line up. It doesn't make sense. It seems like there's a lot that we're just not getting right now.
Yep. And so this documentary coming out, if it lines up with this, which I'm guessing it's going to line up and go down the same path, and I don't call it I call it the Shining theory, where the theory believes here that, like the movie The Shining, that David Cowley just became unhinged with no medication, no PTSD, no drugs, no prescription painkillers, no combination. He just slowly lost his mind. So they're going with the Shining theory here, that this all just happened. And now they're kind of bundling that with the fact that Kamel Crowley also went through a very similar incident, and they're kind of going through this together.
Yeah, she went through, what they said is she went through a rapture.
He used the word rapture, yep.
Yeah, on October 30th.
On October 30th, yep. He got home from making a trip to the Home Depot, and she was completing a bout with the rapture. Now, we heard earlier that David Cowley on his cell phone recorded Kamel during a bad trip, spacing out on drugs. Is this intended to be this same article? Because he just got home from Home Depot, and it says he held her in her arms and helped her get through her rapture. Is that implying now that she was on a bad trip relating to drugs, or did she just have a psychotic episode? He didn't sound like this article that he was filming it, or are these two separate incidences now?
Yeah, which is why a toxicology report is vital. I mean, I don't know if you can do that after 3 weeks, what value it would actually be, or if you could get anything. But it would be nice to know what type of medication that they were on, if any. And it is kind of strange that they don't really mention anything like that. So, I mean, okay, if it's not that, then what is it? I mean, Kamel got raptured, but she's still here. I mean, what does that mean? So there are some very, very weird quotes that, do not fear, sweet body, for we have felt this pain together. It's something that he recorded. This is something David said in a recording. So I don't know. I mean, it sounds like they were both tripping out. That's the way that I read a lot of these quotes when it's talking about stuff like that.
And tripping out, just as far as I understand you, just to make clear so there's no assumptions, that's a result of a drug, drug use is tripping out. But he never uses the phrase drugs or the result of a bad trip or a high. He keeps saying it's a psychosis that was just in their heads. And so I'd like to get clarification on anyone else watching this video. Please feel free to comment below the video. But it sounds like these are bad trips, people tripping out here between David and Kamel, which to me means drug use. Now, they were using recreational drugs. I'm not sure how that would relate to a bad trip with as far as illicit drugs. That would be something mind altering to that extent with these types of things. But the author never uses the word drugs in this article, and kind of alludes to the fact that they just lost it. But like I mentioned on the Justice for David Cowley page, it seems to be almost a the article seems to be and might be more of an it's got the fingerprints and the feel to a Operation Mockingbird sense to it back in the 50s and 60s when the CIA were hired and had over 3,000 members of the press on their payroll under the table with various high-level newspapers, radio, television, and TV and high places in the media to help sway people's opinions certain directions. Now they say that the Operation Mockingbird has since gone away. They're not using it. We all know that that's false, and that's clearly, if you read the news in today's world, most of the leading headlines in the nation and the world articles are very, very slanted and propagandized. This article has a feel of that to that. Like I said earlier, I'm not sure if Mr. Alec Wilkinson is on the payroll by someone other than the New Yorker, but this article has the feel of public sway, of changing the narrative, pushing an angle without just simply writing a good article, being authentic. This has got too much that it's slanted to me. It seems like it's really pushing one angle. Now, the other thing when I read the article, now we know that the original article was set to go publish in September or August of last fall. This, when one reads it, it does seem disjointed. It doesn't seem to read. It doesn't seem to flow properly, and then it ends abruptly at the very end. And it seems like it was hacked through and reformatted, and a bunch of the content erased and edited. It just seems very heavily edited because it doesn't flow correctly. I know the big thing with you and I, Greg, is what we heard from the very beginning. This is really going to put us in our place. This article, and although it mentions our names in the second paragraph, it doesn't go on and follow back up with that. There's nothing in there negative about you or I or these conspiracy thinkers or with outside opinions, and then it just goes on to tell all these experiences with David. So it seems. What do you think about the article? How the flow?
It seems very choppy, like it's very chopped up, and it almost seems like maybe there was a lot that was taken out. That maybe one day this guy will write a book or something on this. Because he was given a lot of data, a lot of things, and told a lot of things, second, third hand things, but it sounds like he's seen the actual journal that obviously, a lot of people would also like to see, and he's seen a lot of this, I'll just say he's seen a lot of second and third hand things, so it's very, very choppy. It doesn't really flow. Not that any of my articles have ever really flowed. It does seem like someone who has a lot of. There's just a lot of different topics. There's a lot of different things that he covers and then just kind of lets go and doesn't really commentate on it, which is good. I mean, it's just kind of putting those quotes out there of what these people are saying. But I don't know how much time they spent on the phone with you, but it was like one little mention, one paragraph, maybe two, and I think that was just to kind of set up what kind of the alternative theory might really be. And the alternative theory is that David Cowley might not be guilty. I think the whole theory that we have right now, at best, is that we think David Cowley is guilty. I think that's all that anyone who believes he's guilty can really say, because you don't know. You don't know. It's not a fact that David Cowley is guilty, at least from everything that I've seen so far. And I haven't, from anyone that I've ever talked to who does believe that David Cowley is guilty, they never have facts. It's speculation. It's second, third-hand things. It's things that they were told. It's what they want to think, and that's fine, but it's not a fact. Yeah,
I also like the fact that the author here uses uses the various quotes that we can assume is taken from the journal, that is actually things that David wrote. But then we get a curious handful of other things that are mentioned that are all hearsay, second, third-hand information. One thing that caught me, that took me back, was a comment that the day before David left for his meeting with the producers in Los Angeles, he was on the floor curled up crying because he was so nervous to go on this trip. Now, that wasn't quoted. I'm pretty sure David wouldn't write that about himself in the journal. And it made it sound, the way the author wrote it here in this article, that Commell wrote that. That Commell gave this description of David being really bad with his self-confidence, being very anxious and having low self-esteem. And these things kind of built up, but who's writing it? Commell didn't write it. Where did Alec Wilkinson get from this? Where did he get this information? And how do we know? And basically, the question is, point blank, how do we know David was on the ground, curled up in the bathroom, crying before he left for L.A.? How did Alec Wilkinson? Where did he get this from?
I think it came from Commell's sister.
And that could be true. That could be Commell's sister Sidra that the author got this information from. But once again, this is third-hand information that he's presenting as fact. How does Sidra know this? Is this something that she said that Commell told me? Well, that could be true. It could also very well be not true. So how far do we take this information? And I'm not just playing devil's advocate here, but it seems, I don't know, it seems that there's a lot of quotes in here built up as fact. There are a lot of things mentioned or stated as fact that are speculation. Even toward the end of the article, the author talks about the pistol that David kept in a safe in the bedroom. And that very pistol he used as he shot, as it says here, he shot Commell and Ranny as they lay on the living room floor. Sometime later, he sat down beside them and shot himself. This is taking pretty creative license here. This is really going the extra step as planting some information here as facts, whereas this author does not know that this happened that way, nor could he ever know this. That's a stretch, I think, by laying down a comment like that, and that's what makes me believe that there's other forces involved here with this article behind the scenes, I believe.
Yeah, he makes a lot of things like that, a lot of guesses, and it just seems like he was trying to tell, whatever he wanted to tell. He was telling his story of what he thought really, really happened. But for him to claim to me that the bullet hole in the living room doesn't really matter, it was almost like, what does it matter?
Yes, Greg, can you expand a little bit?
He told me that.
Can you expand on your email conversation with the author?
Yeah, that's basically what he said. Is he didn't understand why I would think that would even matter. He was saying that even without that, even if police had never found that bullet, that David Cowley is still guilty. And it's like, how do you know that? You don't know that. So why would you say that? And what is it based on? Because, I don't know. I was going to pull up some of the actual quotes.
Oh yeah, go ahead and find it. In the meantime, I'll talk about what is your thoughts also as far as if you were a member of the Apple Valley Police Department, for instance, and you read this article, what would you think? What would be your take on this? This is really shoving aside their theory and creating a new one and going public with it. So far as making a documentary, world premiere documentary coming up, saying really an entirely different scenario than the police came up with. How would you feel if that was you? This is really going to make that organization look bad when this movie comes out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no way that it can't. What I'm curious now to see is, since Eric didn't talk about this bullet hole in the living room, or not Eric.
Alec?
What's his name? Yeah, Alec. Since Alec didn't talk about the bullet hole in the living room, I'm curious now to see if this new documentary will actually mention that, because now I'm starting to think that it probably won't.
I don't think
And
I'd bet that it wouldn't. It's not going to touch that because it's got an angle and it's pushing a certain narrative and that does not fit. So I would have a hard time believing that the failures of the investigation are going to make this article, this documentary at all.
that's kind of what I was, that's kind of, I wouldn't say that's what I was told that this was gonna be, but I mean, it does seem like, how do you not go there? How do you talk about all this? You go there with David and all the stuff that he was supposed to have done, but then we're not going to talk about all of the different things that the cops didn't done. And the only reason why they don't want to talk about it is because they don't want us asking questions, which just leads people to ask more questions. Um, so when I talked with him, or we had exchanged a few notes back and forth, and for Alec, he just basically said that he thought that I knew about the whole bullet hole and blah blah blah. Well, yeah, I did, but when I talked to him, I didn't feel like Alec knew about that, and it sounded like his fact checker also didn't know. But he's still going on and saying, this is what happened. He's rephrasing to me what happened, and he's not mentioning the bullet hole that the police missed for 1 month. And it just seemed like he didn't write it because it didn't fit whatever story he was trying to tell, which is true because it would raise a lot more questions. And if he's trying to tell a certain story, then I can totally see why he didn't put that in there.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that. That it's not going to fit and it'll not be in the article or the documentary, any of that line of questioning. Yeah, I remember then the other article, the part of the article that I remember reading was the David's time in Iraq when he saw the 40 soldiers killed in that IED explosion along the roadside. It did go in some details that he wrote about in depth about seeing the carnage at that site, and then alluding to the fact that it can only lead the reader of the article down the path that, maybe he did have a little PTSD, and I think it's trying to introduce that concept again into the reader's mind. It's planting that seed that once again maybe it was a PTSD thing that of things he saw and he flipped out.
But
that's no other reason I don't think to bring that up.
Yeah.
In the article. It's the only mention of anything PTSD related, but and then it says he got back from Germany, wasn't greeted by anybody, and decided to take his first and only prostitute in Germany. I don't know how that related to the article to bring up that comment.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have some people that are just searching kind of for anything, and it seems like a lot of the stuff that he's pulling out from these journals and from all of the information that he's got from all of the people that he talked to, from sitting in David's house. This is what he came up with. This is his story. This is the story Alec Wilkinson wants to tell. It's not the facts. It's
Correct.
not all of the facts. It's not what really happened. And so I think that's the and I think he did a really good job at towing that line, at kind of balancing it out. Because like I was telling you, like I've read this about 3 times now, and each time it's I'm just like, after I read it, my views are like different, where it's just like, oh man, okay. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm just like, why isn't he talking about this, or why is this even here? So I kind of do go back and forth on it. But I mean, it's still, there's a huge part that's mentioned about these things that David's wife is saying. And it's really, really weird when she says, don't worry about the pain because you do not know how to feel pain, and you will return to the dust and your dark slumber, and I will be gone. To me, that sounds like a demon. To me, that sounds like, you talk about some outside force. I mean, it's also it's the outside force.
Mm-hmm.
It's the source of evil. Where it's like she says, David is or Kamel's telling David this, and it looks like this is in a recording. And so I'm wondering if this might actually make it into that film. I don't know. It sounds like some really scary stuff. She's like, I have my mission, and she heard a woman's scary voice. To me, that was kind of odd too. So I don't know if this is that same day, but and then she reproduced that voice for David saying, I've warned you, and then she says, I want you, please come with me, your place won't come to me, there's nothing left here. Sounds like a demon trying to like reel them in. And I mean, to a lot of people, it might just be like, oh, this is just crazy, whatever. But there's a reason for everything, and there's a reason why these words were actually written. I just don't understand it yet. And every time that I read this, that's how I feel. It's like I need to read it again. It's like one of those movies you have to watch 3 or 4 times to really get everything.
Correct. And once again, it does not sound to me like the result of drug use. The comments that were made, the things that she was seeing, the visions and whatnot, seems like you said, it seemed more menacing. It had a very menacing feel to this entire thing. The one thing that if I was to believe the story, if I was to believe that David did this and read the story and say, you know what, I buy it, hook, line, and sinker, there's only one phrase that I've seen that leads me to go down that path of this being indeed a possibility. Now, David's friend Dan Luttrell served with him in Afghanistan, hadn't spoken to David in a while. Then, late one night a few days before Christmas, the article reads, I was sitting on the computer drinking and I got a message from him, Dan said. They discussed the Army, their lives, and Gray State. David was drinking absinthe. I was drinking whiskey and beer, said Luttrell. After about 2 hours, Luttrell said he's ready for bed, and David asks him to delete their exchange on the computer, delete the chat. He said, his exact words from David Cowley were, if you're truly my brother and friend, you'll do it. I promise, you'll understand soon. Now this, before Christmas, a couple nights before Christmas, is extremely close to the alleged killings that took place, and if David did this, that would, basically, that would make sense if he did this and had this planned and premeditated to do this. Now the offset to that is if David and his family were killed by outside hit squad, a hit team, then this message does not make sense. Why would he say something to this? Why would he say something to this effect? But once again, if David did do this, it still doesn't explain why hollow points were used, why nothing was left behind as far as the reasoning, why was the wife shot twice in the head, and why did no one hear the gunshots in the home. So it goes down you still got to account for all these strange oddities so far, with the sliding door being left open, random shots around the house, no one hearing anything, and that whole strangeness. But that would be the one thing that probably, if anything, would be leading to evidence of this actually taking place. That's the one strongest piece right there, where he's actually making a prediction to a friend online. Now, we don't know, once again, this is third-hand information of this, if this exchange took place. Now, if we actually had this article and this friend named Dan Luttrell was able to come back and undelete or go back and retrieve this message, this would be very interesting to read. But the rest of the article and the messages of this psychotic episodes here are a lot of I don't want to say fluff, but it's beefing up this psychotic story. It's reinforcing this psychotic story. It's reinforcing the reader's mind that this really did go down this way, and it's presented as fact.
Yeah, and it doesn't talk about why this journal stopped, and you still have at least another month, maybe 2, before David actually kills himself. Well, why do they think that he stopped writing in this journal? And there were still people in contact with him after that. And people are out there who have seen who have spoken with David, who had some type of online conversation with David in his last days. You people out there know exactly, at least how he was, what he was like then, and you can compare that to whenever you met him back in 2012 or whatever date. But those, are there any of those out there? Are there any crazy things that David said? Because everything that we've seen from people who have come forward and talked about David in those last days, there's nothing crazy out there. They don't say that he's saying anything crazy.
Correct.
So
it's a Jekyll and Hyde story is what we're getting here. We're seeing David post very lucid, sane writings and posts and comments on the internet, and right up until the Christmas day, focused on the documentary, getting things done. But then we get this kind of a manic person that's not really making sense as far as these quotes go. Besides, so now once again, I can believe that for one individual person going through these ups and downs, phases and stages. But when you get 2 going through the exact same kind of phases, the odds of that happening is very, very slim. I think for this to be this whole thing to be plausible, it's going to take a lot of coincidences to buy into this entire story. Now, what did you think, Greg, of the story with Chris Peck, David and Kamel arriving at the house to buy the marijuana December 19th in Minneapolis, and then that was out already. We knew this. This was information that was out there. But what was new here is that Chris Peck says that he started giving everything back. He started, David gave all these items back, books to read, things that he wasn't going to use, and this is really now selling the suicide story. It says it really talks about the decision often gives people a feeling of being released from their troubles. Once they make the decision in their head they're going to commit suicide, they start actually becoming manic, happy, a weight's been lifted, and Chris Peck alleges that they were really happy. They were uncontrollably, jealously happy, and handed him a bunch of things that he didn't need. And he goes, "I don't need this stuff back. You can have it." So, is that another phrase that we're taking here from Chris Peck that may be just taken out of place, or did David really do this and he just took it that way, or was it premeditated? This is the 19th now. They haven't even picked up their daughter from school yet for the Christmas holidays. On the 19th from school. This is 1 in the afternoon, and it sounds like they're both acting this way. They were both had already pre-planned it. Was this pre-planned this far in advance? If they did indeed do this,
and that also shows that there is one more person, Chris Peck, who saw David in the last couple of days, didn't notice anything strange. So now we're talking about sometime between December 20th and December 25th or 26th, he snaps. All these other people were saying David's not talking to anybody, he's losing weight, he smells like crap, he looks skinny, blah, blah, blah. And here you have Chris Peck saying they were happy. I mean, unless he's saying they were too happy. If he's trying to say that they were happy because they had come to the conclusion that they were going to commit suicide and take their daughter with them, I mean, that's some pretty hardcore stuff. So I don't want to accuse him of saying that, but I hope that's not what he's saying. And only he knows that. But it doesn't sound like he noticed anything strange when he talked to them and gave them some weed.
Yeah, and that once again, that all we know is that David occasionally used recreational drugs, nothing about Comel, but the stuff we're getting into here is some huge, some serious drug use. If this is the case, it doesn't really tie, doesn't make sense. Now we're talking about serious psychological episodes, psychosis here, the author goes on to say, and then we've got the possession, potential of a demon possession spirit in that house that has taken over control of these two individuals. So once again, this is not the end-all story like it was portrayed to me, that once this article comes out, everyone will have their answers. Once the documentary comes out, everyone will have their answers. It'll give us a clean slate to finish on, and that's what really raises the red flag for me, is too many people predicting this. Too many people predicting this will finally shut you guys up. Well, this is a very odd article to read from this perspective, and I'm just assuming that the documentary will be much of the same, and I think next year at this time we'll be having the same discussions, and as we keep moving forward, because none of this is really putting the pieces into place. It's more distraction, it's more not derailing the conversation, distraction, but it's more redirection. It's getting the user to focus on something else, and it just, to me, it's too fishy.
Yeah, well, they definitely got me focused on it, on some things for sure. What about the last thing David wrote in his journal? Do you have that open?
Yeah, I haven't found. I gotta find it here yet. But go ahead.
He says, "I am no one. It is everyone else who is someone." Then in the same, then Alec writes, "On Christmas morning, David made a list of plans for the coming year. Christmas, 6-day countdown. It will be a new year," he wrote, and he reminded himself that December 30th was the last day to crowdfund. Then, with a pistol that he kept in a safe in the bedroom, he shot Kamel and Rania as they lay on the living room floor. Sometime later, he sat down beside them and shot himself. See, I mean, you just see how quickly it goes from this guy's planning for the future, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so that to me was strange.
It jumps around. It just certainly jumps around with the
because
article.
Yeah, because the last time he wrote, you said, was in November. So in the very next sentence, now we're on Christmas morning. I mean, it's just, they're trying to tell a certain story that it just seems choppy. It seems like eyes wide shut. Like there's just a lot more to this that was edited out or something. So maybe Alec is going to write a book on this someday.
Yeah, it could be. It does seem that there's pieces. It seems to me that there's chunks of paragraphs here that were wiped out, and then the reading doesn't flow from one section to the next. Especially that one article that you just read. That particular paragraph talks about David being happy, excited, talking about the future, and then it jumps right into grabbing the gun and killing himself. So
it's crazy.
It doesn't
do that.
It doesn't flow.
No.
Now, what about the when they first went in to look at the home, the cleaning company had maybe potentially painted a white rectangle over the blood. Is that something that a cleaning company would normally partake in do, or is that a special request? Or if their job is to clean the essential biohazard in that home, did they bring along their paint cans and decide to paint the wall? Because even when Mason Hendricks went there the very first time, he thought it was odd because he knew something was painted over, but it was just a rectangle of white paint. And that's why Allah Akbar was written on the wall. And I'm just from a question from a standpoint of the cleaning service. Is that something that they would do, or if they were asked to do, maybe they did it, or did the law enforcement do it, or did the neighbors or family do it? I'd like to know who did the painting and why. It was a crime scene. It was there. There was no really need to hide it. Not sure what painting white over it would do. Typically, you want to cover up something in paint, you're going to paint it much darker. Throw on a couple coats of black paint, and it's going to be covered up just like that. But they decided to use white which I'm sure by the time the family got into that house, the red lettering bled right through anyway. So that whole thing confuses me.
Yeah, it does, because if Mason didn't know about that, and he was in the house a couple days after, there's got to be a lot of other things that he has to be open to the fact that there's probably a lot of other things he might not know about either. But getting back to the question there, I think obviously the Apple Valley Police Department had to have whoever they hired to do the actual painting. The order had to come from them, and then it's like, okay, who actually saw it? Who actually saw Allah?
Allah
What is it?
Akbar, Allah Akbar written on the wall.
Written on the wall. Who actually saw that? Only the police, because nobody else has really claimed to have seen it. I'm not saying that that wasn't there. I do think that was there. I have no reason to think that wasn't there. But it's like, okay, who saw it? Who ordered it to be painted? Who informed the family? And then why did they paint? I mean, I can see why they would paint it. You don't want something like that just sitting there. I can totally get that. But I'm just wondering how long they kept that from the family, I guess, is really what I'm trying to say.
I think it sounds like it was March on the March 13th or 14th visit on my timeline. It shows that everyone showed up there and had a discussion with the Apple Valley Police, and they told them all at that time the Muslim angle that was going on with the Quran, the quotes, the writing in the notebook, and that's, I think, at the time that the Alam family in Texas had requested to the Apple Valley Police that if they could please redact that and keep that out of the press. It just would cause too many angles, uncomfortable situations, and it looks like they did that for some time. They were able to keep that under until the following January 2016, when Fox 9 News, the investigator report, came out and opened that whole ugly wound up to the dismay of the Alam family. Now, speaking of the Alam family, they were included in this article, and I'm assuming the documentary, so they may not have a problem with it anymore, or maybe the fact that it's out there, they've decided just to go along with it, but they do not seem upset that now has since come out. What are your thoughts on the fact that they played an active role in this article as well, the father and the sister?
Well, I mean, you've talked with the father and sister too. Did it seem like it was the same stuff that they were telling you?
The Muslim angle wasn't out when I spoke to the father at that time. Only later, that came out in January of 2016, and I spoke with him in August of 2015.
So everything that they know about all of that is secondhand from the cops, and then everything that they've been telling us is all third hand.
Correct. Siddur is the only one who told me that, just saying, they really requested that be left out. And when we got the police report back, the 94 pages of the Apple Valley Police Report, the items that were redacted in the black marker was all things related to the Muslim writing on the wall, the Quran, the submit to Allah. Now that whole garbage, in addition to some random other things that were redacted.
Yeah, which just seems strange. It seems strange that there's no reason for the cops to hide that from the family. There's no reason the family shouldn't have known from the very start. Do we know if Dan Crowley and Kate Crowley, they should have at least, the police should have told them from the very start, not 2 months later. So I think that's another question.
I believe, and this is just my opinion, that I think all the family members were told that March, 2 months after the bodies were found.
I mean, but that just shows that there's so many other things that they could not have been told about too.
I agree. That in a case like that, you would think they'd be told everything up front, nothing would be filtered, and then the family having to go through that 2 months later, now finding out that additional information really would be upsetting.
Or even seeking out any alternative theories. Was there any danger to that? Was there any risk to that? So, just another question, I guess.
Good stuff. So it's very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to the documentary to see what angle that's on. That will portray. Then that is for the viewers out there, that's a 93-minute documentary that'll be premiering, I think, April 23rd at the Tribeca Film Festival. You can go on the Tribeca.com and look at the film listing. There's 80 some films, I think, being premiered or being shown over the next couple of weeks when that begins. But Gray State is under the Spotlight Documentary category. Eric Nelson is the director. Werner Herzog is the executive producer, I believe. So that'll be interesting. Once again, what we've been hearing about that documentary is it should answer the questions. It should silence the critics, the theorists. So I don't think it'll do that, but we'll see here when that comes out at the end of the month. Any other final thoughts here, Greg?
Nope. I think that kind of wraps it up for that tale there. I know you have some new information. Can you give us a little teaser?
Yes, I did receive the 2 different FOIAs here recently. One from the Minnesota BCA, that's the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, asked for the files, the public-related files, everything about the case, and I did receive that. I'm going to be going through, and some of that's the same, some of that is new information that we can help with the putting the timeline together with the additional information and things like that. And then the Hennepin County Examiner, medical examiner's report, we did get the official medical examiner's report on the 3 bodies as far as that goes, and then the additional photos from the BCA that we didn't get with the Apple Valley Police FOIA, and that amounts to about 200 additional photos that we haven't seen before, and were for some reason, I guess, suppressed or filtered.
That's a lot.
So there's a lot of new photos out there, and I'm still not sure why. I know the law enforcement, when they get FOIA requests like this for public to be released to the public, they can take some. They can go through and filter out at their discretion photos that'll be gruesome or inappropriate to show, things like that, and they have the right to withhold those. And so that makes sense. We didn't get anything that was gruesome or body pictures and things like that. I did receive, like I said, 200 additional photos. Most of that's blood spatter, additional pictures of the house, pictures of the floor, the different rooms, pictures we didn't get before, pictures of the weapon, a picture of the knife that was at the scene. That was news to us. I still don't know why David Cowley had a knife at the scene. So new things like that. None, I repeat, none were gruesome or disgusting or should have been withheld from the first time. So I'm not sure who makes that decision or who decides those types of things, but plenty of new photos, and we'll be going over those pertinent ones as well.
Were there any ones that kind of stuck out to you?
I would say there's maybe of the 200, there may be a dozen that were interesting as far as items that we could use as far as pertinent photos that there was one of the rooms in the house that were released that we never had pictures of when the crime scene photographers went through that house. That back room near the rear slider, all the pictures relating to that back room were never released in the first 400 photos. Now there's probably 25 pictures of that back dining room, the back room leading to the garage, in front of the rear slider window. There's nothing in there. Nothing took place in that room.